Welcome back, everyone. This is another episode of the Exodus Project. I'm your host, Steve Eisenhower. I'm joined with my good friend, Rabbi Stuart Federow,
Ta-da!
author of Judaism and Christianity: A Contrast, available in English and Spanish. You can find that in the description of this video. Just follow the Amazon link. Helps him out, helps me out, and you'll learn something. But before we get started, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and give the rabbi and I a big thumbs up. So, as we promised last time, we said if you're going to post something dumb on my channel, we're going to talk about it. So, someone seems to think that the Shroud of Turin is an absolute proof for the resurrection of Jesus. So, we're going to talk about it. Is the Shroud of Turin a absolute proof that Christianity is a religion backed by science, as
Steve,
we're told?
Steve, let me ask you a question. Let's pretend that the Shroud of Turin really was the cloth in which Jesus was buried. Let's pretend that, like they say, that the image of Jesus is really the image of Jesus on the cloth. All that would prove is that he was buried.
Yeah.
It wouldn't prove anything about a resurrection. It's not a moving picture that we see on the shroud.
Right.
Okay. All it would say is that he died and this was his clothing.
Right.
Okay. So just making the statement that it proves that he was resurrected is silly.
Right. Especially when we know from the era that the Jews were burying with bone boxes. So,
well, no, wait.
Well, then again, that was after they would go back in and put your bones in a box. But
right, because the space was limited.
Right.
Right, and I think that's more true outside of the land of Israel than it was true in the land of Israel, because outside the land of Israel, you had Jews in cities, and the cities would have their burial plots, and they would also have their ossuary, the place where the bones were buried alone as bone.
Right,
not
right.
not with flesh and veins and everything else still on the bone.
But that would make sense why, if this were real, why you would even have it, because they go back in to gather the bones.
Right. So I think the ossuaries are more with outside the land of Israel than in the land of Israel, and more in cities than it was in the country.
Right.
But I could be wrong about that. I'm not sure. But the whole idea that this is proof of anything, even if you assume, wrongly so, but even if you assume that what they said about the shroud was true, it doesn't prove a thing.
Right.
When you cling to straws, okay, if your faith is so weak that you have to cling to a straw to maintain your faith, then your faith is built on sand, not on concrete.
Right.
And the sand shifts.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
So yeah,
okay.
Going to address the Shroud of Turin, and there was also a comment made against the Masoretic text, so we're going to talk about that for just a little bit at the end. But let's do it. So this is the comment. You don't dare make a video against the Shroud. And we tried to warn you, buddy. Like, you post something crazy on here.
And by the way, look at the image in Peter Winston's ID thing. I don't know what to call it. What you have on the screen.
His little profile picture there, yeah.
Little profile picture. That is from the Shroud of Turin.
Right.
Okay. His eyes are closed. Why would that prove a resurrection? I mean, even if the eyes were open, of course, even if the eyes were open, it wouldn't prove much of anything.
Right.
So, whatever. All right.
But it just goes to show what he puts his faith in. He puts his faith in relics, not in the Bible.
If your faith is weak, then you will grab at straws to keep you afloat. So,
Okay. So if it's real, does it matter?
Right.
Deuteronomy 13, if you want to read that for me, Rabbi.
If there arises among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder comes to pass, of which he spoke to you, saying, let us go after other gods which you have not known, and let us serve them. You shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for the eternal your God tests you to know whether you love the eternal your God with all your heart and with all your soul. You shall walk after the eternal your God and fear him and keep his commandments and obey his voice, and you shall serve him and hold fast to him. And that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he has spoken to turn you away from the eternal your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you out of the house of slavery, to thrust you out of the way which which the eternal your God commanded you to walk in. So shall you purge the evil away from the midst of you. What is this saying? It's saying that miracles don't prove a thing.
Right.
That the statement, the message of the messenger, if it is in agreement with what we know comes from God, then you can accept what he's saying, because it is in accordance with what God already told us.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's not in accordance, miracles don't prove the messenger. Miracles don't prove the message of the messenger. And if you go on to read it, it says kill him.
Yeah,
because he's trying to
all that. Yeah, exactly.
Because he's trying to take you away from God.
Right.
Okay. And what if he comes to you and says, I'm going to do a miracle, and he does the miracle, and then what he tells you isn't to go after a different God, but it's still against what we know comes from God. You still have to reject the message.
Right.
Even if he's not bringing you into idolatry, okay, because to me it seems, at least, I haven't delved into this, but it seems that he's being put to death for bringing you into idolatry. Even if he doesn't bring you into idolatry, but he's telling you something that goes against what you know comes from God, it doesn't prove it just because the miracle he said he was going to do, actually he does.
Yeah. Right.
So,
well, there, verse 5, you shall walk after the eternal your God and fear him and keep his commandments. So if the message is to break or forsake the commandments,
then you have to reject the messenger and reject the message that he came with.
Right.
It doesn't matter. Miracles don't prove anything in Judaism.
Right.
Right. But you notice that people who have a very weak faith need that constant reinforcement of what they believe to keep believing it.
Mm-hmm.
And, with all of the anti-Semitism now rising, but over the past 2023 years, give or take, okay, you would think that the Jews, more than anybody, would be the most prone to give up on their religion.
You'd think, wouldn't you? You'd really think so.
But we're not. We're not.
Right.
Have there been Jews who gave up, who actually wound up converting to the idolatry of Christianity? Of course. In the 1800s, you could not be the conductor of an orchestra without being Christian. So there were economic incentives to become a Christian. Even in the United States, up until the middle 1900s, there were clubs who wouldn't allow you. There were areas of towns who wouldn't let you live there if you were a Jew. So converting to Christianity got you advantages. And yet, by and large, the majority of Jews rejected it, wouldn't do it. But you would think that in far greater numbers than we actually did, that people would turn their back on God and Judaism and the Jewish people and become Christians, but it didn't happen like that.
Right. Right.
And and we don't need constant miracles, faith healing.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Standing in front of a television set and swaying, we don't do that. We don't have to do that, because our faith is a lot stronger. There's a whole theology to Jews who question. That we question what we're told. And it makes for a stronger belief system, because you have delved into it, you have investigated it, you have wrestled, you have wrestled with God, because what is being a Jew what does it mean to be Israel? To wrestle with God. And having wrestled, you become stronger in the faith.
Hmm.
So we don't need the miracles and the hand waving and whatever else.
Right.
Right.
And to say that the resurrection proves that the religion is true, well, I'm sorry, Peter Winston, but even your New Testament and Revelation says that the Antichrist is going to die and be resurrected. So by your own book, it doesn't prove a thing. So
And does that mean that Elijah and Elisha resurrected people?
yeah, right,
Elijah the prophet, the son of that woman, he brought back from the dead. Does that mean that that boy is God?
right,
Does that mean that boy was the Messiah? Does that prove? It doesn't prove anything about the boy. What
right.
it proves, what it proves is that God is merciful and compassionate and kind,
Mhm.
and does that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, once again, Jay brought back what's his face, Lazarus, and he was already starting to rot. Does that mean Lazarus is God too?
Right.
You know, so
Miracles don't prove anything. Not even a miracle, if it were true, which it is not true, but even the quote unquote miracle of a shroud of Turin.
right. And there it is, people. That's a photo enhanced image of what the alleged shroud looked like. Um, so it's a big sheet of cloth that would have gone over the front and down the back. But you know what's funny, Rabbi, is it doesn't really look so much like like if the shroud was draped over somebody, it would go to the contour, not be like a perfect two-dimensional picture. You know what I mean?
Right, absolutely. With some of it almost looking three-dimensional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that this reminds me of a verse in John 19. If you want to talk about that for a second, John 19:40, and what Jesus was actually wrapped in.
Oh, yes. That's the funny thing. If you take a look at the New Testament itself, one of the Gospels says that Jesus was buried in strips of cloth. Okay. This is John chapter 19, verse 40. Then took they the body of Jesus and wound it in linen clothes with the spices as the manner of the Jews is to bury.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take a look at the Greek there, okay, the othonion, the definition is a piece of linen, small linen cloth, or strips of linen cloth for swathing the dead.
Right.
And Strong's definition has it as bandages.
So they wrapped him up like a mummy. Not
They're,
a they
they're
didn't.
wrapped up. Not and by the way, another thing, take a look at the body on the left and compare it with the body on the right. Doesn't the body on the left look a lot smaller than the body on the right?
Yeah. Unless that
I
could just be
mean,
the image, but yeah. Yeah.
right. And how the hands are conveniently positioned over the groin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but take a look at the distance from hand over the groin to shoulder, and then look at shoulder to where you think the groin would be. I just think that the one on the left is a lot smaller than the one on the right. How is that possible?
Right. And this is a super enhanced image. Like what you would have if you're looking at it in a museum or something wouldn't even look close to this. It would just be blood stains with what you might think is a face, you know?
Right. All right. And by the way, as we'll see when we look at the things you wrote, you found, the earliest Catholic Church, when this was presented to them, called it a fake.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
didn't believe it.
And what's funny was Christians were coming from all over the place to come see this thing,
Yeah.
which
Give me,
means
Steve, I got to shut the door. Give me a
yeah,
second.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry.
You're fine. But Christians were coming from all over the place to see this thing, willing to pay money to come to the church to see this thing.
How
You,
convenient.
you know what I mean? You'd think if your church has the eligibility to say, we can make millions off of this. Let's say it's real, but yet they still say it's fake. Like what does that say about it? And we're going to get
Well,
to that, but
they don't. No, they don't. I don't think they any longer say it's fake. They're just not going to say it's real because they don't want to damage their position with their believers. according to findings published by nature.com. Look this up yourself, nature.com. In their scientific reports column, the radiocarbon measurements would place the origin of the TS linen. I don't know what that means.
Turin shroud linen.
Okay. Turin shroud linen in the time frame of 1260 to 1390, with a majority of the DNA found on the shroud being Western European. Really? Western European? How is that possible if Jesus was Jewish? This is echoed by the official history.com. Okay. The shroud first surfaced in medieval France. How did it get there?
Right.
You know, it's like all the different relics of Europe. Okay. Why would a person who is in the Middle East, is in Jerusalem, who has why would they let somebody take it from them? Because they bought it?
Hmm.
Well, how do you certify that the left finger of some prophet, you know, some disciple, apostle, okay, how do you verify that the bone of the finger, the left hand of the, you know, came from that? And they all wind up in Europe. Funny how I don't think they're found that often in the Middle East itself, but they all wind up where Christianity took root.
Right. And in part with the DNA wasn't just human. I mean, there were like DNA fragments of like fauna, you know, like trees or flora. I mean, like trees that are only found in like Western Europe.
Right.
So come on now,
No,
people. Like
they
surfaced in France,
you
and all
know,
the DNA is from that same area. So
in dealing with religion, in dealing with Christian missionaries, never, ever, ever, ever underestimate the power of the human mind to rationalize some of the silliest things in the world.
yeah,
Which, by the way, probably goes for Jews too somehow. Because the human mind has no limitation on its ability to rationalize and justify silly beliefs.
Perception is reality, after all.
Perception is reality. That's right. The earliest historical records of the Shroud of Turin place it in Liry, France. During the 1350s, a French knight named Geoffroy de Charny allegedly presented it to the dean of the church in Liry as Jesus's authentic burial shroud. There's no record of how de Charny got his hands on the shroud, nor where it was during the 1300 intervening years since Christ's burial outside Jerusalem. That should read since Jesus's burial, because he wasn't the Christ. But at any rate, the Pope soon declared it was not an actual historic relic. Really? I'd love to see. You know, I'd love to see the Pope's declaration that it was not a historical relic. I wonder what happened to that document.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yep.
But, you know, isn't it just so convenient that for 1300 years this topic didn't come up, and then all of a sudden someone just presents it and says, "Hey, this is at the time that everyone was looking for relics," right?
And if what you're saying, you know, is historically accurate, I wonder how soon it took them to start charging people to see it.
Well, I do believe that comes up next.
Really? After the Church of Liray put the shroud on display, the church began to draw a lot of pilgrims and also a lot of money. However, many prominent members of the church remained skeptical of its authenticity. Around 1389, Pierre d'Arcis, the Bishop of Troyes, France, sent a report to Pope Clement VII, claiming an artist had confessed to forging the shroud. Furthermore, Darcy claimed the dean of the Liray church knew it was a fake and had used it to raise money anyway. In response, the Pope declared the shroud wasn't the true burial cloth of Jesus. Still, he said the Liray church could continue to display it if it acknowledged the cloth was a man-made religious icon, not a historic relic.
Yeah, everybody, like, I'm getting all my sources right from the official history.com. So if you don't if you're not going to take my word for it, look it up yourself.
Yeah, and also if you want to argue with anybody, go argue with history.com.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, make them change it, and then we'll change what we say too.
Mm-hmm. But this is, I mean, this information is so easy to find, everybody. Like, I made this presentation in under an hour, you know, so it's not like you have to be ignoring this to believe it's real.
Right.
especially when you have an artist come forward and say, yeah, I did it, I forged it, right? And the Pope, the Pope says, you know what? No, it's not a relic, it's an icon. It's not legitimate. Like the people who could gain the most from saying it's real said it wasn't. So like, and we know the Catholic Church's track record, for
Right.
not being very comely, not a lot of not so good things went down under the Pope's watches, you know. So
Yep.
yeah, you know what I mean? So I don't know if the Pope at the time is willing to say outright, yeah, this isn't legitimate, why should you believe it now? Like there are billions of Christians out there who would probably say, or at least millions of Christians out there who don't rely on this to have faith in their religion, so why is it so important to you? you know
Because the faith begins with being weak.
yeah,
Otherwise, you don't need stupid stuff like this.
right.
Yep.
Okay.
If you look at the bloodstains as a whole, just as you would when working at a crime scene, you realize they contradict each other. Borini, who is a professor at Liverpool John Moores University in England, told Live Science that points to the artificial origin of these stains. Forensic
Yes.
anthropologist Matteo Borini.
Yep. He outright said that the blood stains are artificial, they're fabricated. Okay, and this is Dr. Walter Macron. This is an organic chemist who initially studied the shroud uh, about 50 years ago now.
Wow. These results fully confirmed Dr. Macron's results and proved the image was painted twice, once with red ochre, followed by vermilion to enhance the blood image areas. In 1987, carbon dating at 3 prestigious laboratories agreed well with his date, 1355 by microscopy and 1325 by C14 dating.
So 14th century on all accounts.
Yep.
And he found ochre and vermilion painted on the shroud. So you have, and what are ochre and vermilion? Well, ochre is in American English is a natural clay earth pigment, a mixture of ferric oxide and varying amounts of clay and sand. It ranges in color from yellow to deep orange or brown. It is also the name of the colors produced by this pigment, especially a light brownish yellow. So they're on the right. They found this on the shroud.
And because it's reddish, that's supposed to look like blood.
Well, the next one looks more like blood. So this was more of like
so that's probably just what it was used to paint it with or something.
Yeah, these were back in for centuries, these were the pigments used to make red paints. So ochre made more of a light reddish paint, and then now vermilion, which is that color red,
Oh, wow.
was the second layer of paint on this in the high blooded areas.
Since ancient times, vermilion was regarded as the color of blood, thus the color of life. It was used to paint temples and the carriages of the emperor, and as the printing paste for personal seals. It was also used for unique red calligraphic ink reserved for emperors. Okay.
Color of blood. But
yeah.
these are the two pigments that we find, or that doctor found on the shroud, and got him to the deduction that it was painted twice. And what do we find is that this pigment is used to paint blood, or what they would say is the color of blood.
You know how it got its name?
What, vermilion?
Yeah.
How?
The guy says, how much does it cost? He says, I'll give you to you for $1 million.
Yeah.
I'm so funny.
You are. That was a good one.
Vermilion.
Vermilion.
For $1 million. All right. At any rate.
Okay. And now I get into a little bit of scripture here. God cannot die.
1 Timothy 2:5, for there is one God, there is one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. Okay, so here it's saying that God is Jesus and God. Numbers 23:19, God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should repent. Has he said, and will he not do? Or has he spoken, and will he not make it good? If God is a man, then like all men, God too would be a liar, since all men lie.
Right.
Okay. If God were a man, then God would be a sinner because God, like all men, would become a man, and men lie and men sin.
Mm-hmm.
And they say they'll do something, they don't do it. And they say they'll do something, they don't make their words good. So this is basically hard contrast between God being God, humans being human. God does not become a human. Humans can't become God.
Right. And what
But
I really
first,
wanted to point out, sorry, what I really wanted to point out in 1 Timothy 2:5 is it identifies Jesus as the man. Doesn't even
right.
call him God, but it says the man.
Yeah, but Christians will say, well, he was man and God. So
Yeah.
but Numbers 23 says if God became a man, like they claim he did it with Jesus, he'd be a
Mhm.
liar.
Right.
1 Samuel 15:29. He who is the glory of Israel does not lie or change his mind, for he is not a human being that he should change his mind. Because all human beings change their mind.
Right.
Right? Or did you change your mind? All right, sorry.
I'm not sure.
Hosea 11:9. For I am God and not a man, the Holy One in your midst, who will not revoke my covenant, and I will not come in wrath or enter the city in judgment. What does that mean? It means that if God were a man, then like all men, he would be vengeful. But God
Right.
is not a man, so he's not going to wreak vengeance on the people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that means.
Right.
Matthew 16:28. Verily I say unto you, there be some standing here which shall not taste of death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom.
I just wanted to mention that he called himself the Son of Man, and then we go
Right.
into
And
some.
what does the Son of Man mean?
Well,
Remember,
the New Testament kind of twists it around, but
right. Well, they're playing off of Daniel.
right.
But the truth of the matter is the word for man is Adam,
Mm-hmm.
and son of Adam means a human being, purely human.
Exactly.
That's all it means.
I mean, in the book of Ezekiel, which is where we find Son of Man the most times,
Yep.
it's always God addressing Ezekiel as Son of Man,
Right.
human being, mortal, right?
Right.
You're not me. This is how I'm going to talk to you. You know what I mean?
Yep. Psalm 146, verse 3. Put not your trust in princes, nor in the Son of Man, in whom there is no help. Well, if Jesus keeps calling himself the Son of Man, and we're told don't put our trust in the Son of Man, what else can you conclude?
Right.
Yep.
Right. Basic math here, people. Yeah. So here's the second comment, which we're going to address in these last few slides.
You know, the arrogance that comes from ignorance never ceases to amaze me.
Right.
People who don't know one aleph from another letter, one letter from the Hebrew alphabet to another letter from the Hebrew, they don't know one letter from another, is what I'm trying to say. And they try to tell us about what's accurate about our scriptures, or they try to tell us the real meaning of what is in our scriptures.
Right.
Oh, come on. I mean, go get a master's degree in Hebrew like I've got, and then come back and talk to me. And
Right.
even when you do, put away your Christian colored glasses through which you read the Bible, and let's just talk about what the Bible actually says, like Numbers 23:19. If God were a man, he'd be a liar.
Mm-hmm.
Make
Right.
up your mind, Okay. This entire statement is an attack against the integrity of religious Jews and not a matter of theology. That's true. And Deuteronomy 4, you shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall you diminish aught from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God which I command you. Let's be very explicitly clear. What does that say? It says, don't add to the word.
Mm-hmm.
And where do we find the word?
Mm.
Where do we find the words of God?
In the Torah, it's Tanakh.
And so what it's saying is don't add words to the text of the Torah. Don't add words to the text of the Torah scroll. Don't add words to what is already written at the time, Deuteronomy 4. That's what it's saying.
Right.
It's not saying we can't interpret it.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
The Bible says in Deuteronomy, actually just a few verses after this, it says, you will write them on the doorposts of your house.
Right.
What's them? What's them? That's exactly right. What's them? We have to understand it and interpret it, and we say it means what we put into the mezuzah on the doorpost of our house.
Right. Exactly.
But we're not adding words to Deuteronomy.
Right.
We're
But
trying to interpret.
right. The point I'm making there is he's
Yes.
insinuating that it was tampered with to delete Jesus, is what he's saying.
Yeah, because the Jews care so much about Jesus and Christianity that
Exactly.
we're going to violate our religion. We're going to violate our holy text,
which
we're
is the
going
whole
to,
point here. Yep.
It's just grabbing at straws
Mm-hmm.
to defend the fact that they cannot defend their religion.
Right.
For I am God and not a man, and I will not come to destroy. We just read that from Hosea. Numbers 23:19. If God were a man, he'd be a liar. Deuteronomy 24:16. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. Jesus cannot die for your sin because every man is put to death for his own sin. Exodus 31, I think it's 31 to 32. Moses says, kill me for their sin. And God says, sorry, it doesn't work that way. The person who does the sin is the one who gets the punishment.
Yep.
Over and over and over, the Torah is the Bible is basically undermining the most basic elements of Christian theology. So all they can do is attack
the integrity of the Jews. Yep.
Right. The Masoretic manuscripts among the Dead Sea Scrolls are astonishingly similar to the standard Hebrew text 1,000 years later, proving that Jewish scribes were accurate in preserving and transmitting the Masoretic scriptures. Richard Ostling, Protestant philosopher at the University of Notre Dame. Okay.
This is coming from a Protestant Christian saying that even the DSS, which they try to say proves the Masoretic text wrong, is astonishingly close to the Masoretic text. So come on, you guys are just, you're saying dumbness here. Like, this is one of the foremost Christian universities in the world. Like, I don't know what else to say about it. You know,
what else can we say about it? If they don't want to, accept what scholars say, you can't keep arguing with a fool who's already decided that what they know is correct, no matter what anybody tells them. Mm-hmm. By the way, you could say the same thing about me. I have no problem with that. I know what I believe, and I know why I believe it, but I've studied it in the original languages. Okay. Ish bechet o yumatu. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. Ish, man, bechet o, in his own sin.
Yep.
Yumatu will be put to death. Okay. What else? That's it. That's it. It's that simple. And they can squirm, they can move, they can do everything they want to do. Yep. But the biblical text is very clear, and it contradicts the most elemental basis of Christian theology.
Right. And here I have, what is Masoretic? Because they always act like it was just this group of guys called the Masoretes that changed the Bible. So, Rabbi, Hebrew speaker, what is Masoretic?
The source, okay, the tradition.
Right.
And all these people did was take the Hebrew scriptures exactly as we've had them for 1,000 years before that or more, and add little points and lines and whatever, which are called vowels, so that people would pronounce it the way they had always pronounced it. And all they did was take a vowel system, add them to the consonants, so that people, when they read it with the vowels, would pronounce it like it had already been pronounced for thousands of years.
Right. And there we see in the definition, it comes from the word Masorah.
Right, which means
refers either to the transmission of Jewish religious tradition or simply just the tradition itself.
But what does Masorite or Masorah mean? It means, I just said it now, it means the source. It means, right.
I mean, regularly I study with a couple different people, and it's just like common Jewish vernacular, the Masorah. You know what I mean? Like, it's like people just don't even think about it, but an outside source, like a third party, here's Masoretic, and they must be a sect that made this new text. No, it's simply all they were trying to do was preserve the tradition in a time when Christianity was kind of like attacking the Jews pretty hard and burning books and destroying literature. Right. You know, I
right.
mean, they were burning
Sora,
Talmuds. You know what I mean? Like, so how are you going
right,
to preserve your tradition
right,
unless and I'm sure Jewish or Hebrew literacy wasn't up at the time.
right,
You know? So
right,
you had to make a system to be able to preserve your religion. No Christian would say they wouldn't do the same thing, right?
right, right. We follow the tradition of our ancestors. We pronounce it the same way they did, more or less. Okay, look, accents change. I know that I speak Hebrew with a Ozark hillbilly accent common in the Ozark Hills of Southwest Missouri, where I grew up. Okay, everybody has accents. Everybody has their way of pronouncing it. Take a look at Spain Spanish.
Right.
Okay,
Or like
Castilian
Mexican
Spanish
Spanish. Yeah.
and Mexican Spanish, or South American Spanish compared to Mexican Spanish, or how
Look
they
at
pronounce
England's
it.
English versus America's English.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
So yes, but by and large, they're pretty close. Okay, Masora, the tradition we follow, and time again, the accuracy is astounding.
Right. And this next slide, this is straight from Britannica. So y'all can't even come at me and say I'm not bringing legitimate sources. This is the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Masoretic text from the Hebrew Masoretic tradition, traditional Hebrew text of the Jewish Bible, meticulously assembled and codified and supplied with diacritical marks to enable correct pronunciation. Here, what they're calling diacritical marks means the vowels.
Yeah, the Necodote. Yeah. Yep.
This monumental work was begun around the 6th century AD and completed in the 10th century by scholars at Talmudic academies in Babylonia and Palestine in an effort to reproduce as far as possible the original text of the Hebrew Old Testament. Their intention was not to interpret the meaning of the scripture, but to transmit to future generations the authentic word of God, meaning its pronunciation. To this end, they gathered manuscripts and whatever oral traditions were available to them. The Masoretic text that resulted from their work shows that every word and every letter was checked with care. In Hebrew or Aramaic, they called attention to strange spellings and unusual grammar and noted discrepancies in various texts. Since texts traditionally omitted vowels in writing, the Masoretes introduced vowel signs to guarantee correct pronunciation. The rigorous care given the Masoretic text in its preparation is credited for the remarkable consistency found in Old Testament Hebrew texts since that time. The Masoretic work enjoyed an absolute monopoly for 600 years, and experts have been astonished at the fidelity of the earliest printed version, so late 15th century, to the earliest surviving codices, late 9th century. The Masoretic text is universally accepted as the authentic Hebrew Bible from the Britannica.
So if they're willing, if a very scholarly, a very scholarly source like Britannica is willing to say that one, it was very meticulous, done with care, meant to simply preserve the tradition. It wasn't meant to be theological. It was just to get the correct pronunciation. Who gives you the right, Pete Winston, to challenge the integrity of these great men who did this? Like, who are you?
Because it's easier to attack their credibility, their integrity. It's easier to attack their integrity than it is to say maybe the Jews have a point.
Right.
Maybe the biblical text doesn't allow me to believe what I believe by believing in Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Every man shall be put to death for his own sin.
Yeah.
Okay. Put not your trust in princes or the Son of Man. If God were a man, he'd be a liar. Come on.
The sins of the wicked are upon the wicked.
Yeah, Ezekiel 18. The wickedness of the wicked is on the wicked, not on the righteous.
And if a wicked man turns from his wicked ways and does good,
right,
he shall live.
He's forgiven. It's called forgiveness.
Yeah.
Okay, even a 6-year-old, if you say to a 6-year-old, your brother wants to get the punishment for what you just did. Is that okay? Is that right? Is that fair that he gets the punishment? I should punish him? They'll say, no, it's not. What if he wants to? Is it right? You're the one who did it. He wants to take the punishment instead of you. Is that the right thing for me to do to punish him? A 6-year-old knows better than that.
Right. That's because we are created B'Tselem Elohim, right? We are wired to God. We should understand these basic principles.
Made in the because we have a basic morality and ethics that tells us punishing someone else for your sin is not right.
Right.
By the way, even Catholics call it natural law.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Ugh.
Okay. Final
In
slide.
Hebrew, orthography, nikud or nikud is a system of diacritical signs used to represent vowels or distinguish between alternative pronunciations of letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Several such diacritical systems were developed in the early Middle Ages. All it does is enable people to pronounce it, and it standardizes it. It means you're not going to come along and pronounce it differently than me because we now have a text that both of us respect.
Right.
And that text
Of it on the
includes
right.
vowels.
Yep.
Exactly. Right.
Mm-hmm. Because, for those people who might not know, a legitimate Torah scroll in a synagogue won't have any of that. So if you aren't familiar with the pronunciation already, how would you know?
Have you ever played Wheel of Fortune, watched TV and played it with your, out to yourself?
Yeah.
Okay. You can get the clue, whatever it's called, without every vowel being there.
Right.
You don't have to have, because you know the language, you know English, you know the grammar. Okay. You know that there is a space after READ, and the first word is he, READ, well. You know it's got to be an S. He reads well, because grammatically you got to have the S there.
Yeah.
Well, the Hebrew's no different.
Right. But that comes down to already having at least intermediate knowledge of the language itself. And that was the problem, is when you have such a low literacy rate, you need things like this to preserve the language initially.
And standardize it. So
exactly.
I'm not saying he reads well. READ, read, he reads.
Yeah.
There's a traditional way that you read the text. You are familiar with the language. You know it well enough that you can figure out what the Wheel of Fortune says without having to have every vowel in place.
Right.
The Torah is the same. If you know the language, you can figure out how to pronounce it. And by putting the nikudot, by putting the vowels, what do they call it? Diacritical signs, okay, fancy term. By putting there, it standardizes the pronunciation. It makes it easier to read because you got the vowels.
Yep. Well, all right, Rabbi, that's the last slide.
All right.
But regarding these quote unquote diacritical signs, check out Rabbi's video, Hebrew Jumpstart. Be sure to check that out, and it'll actually
go to YouTube.
Tell them about it.
Okay, go to YouTube, and in YouTube, do a search in YouTube for Hebrew Jump Start, and you will see a class that we videotaped, and William Hall of Tanakh Talk animated Hebrew Jump Start, learn how to read Hebrew in 1 hour. And it will teach you, if you follow it and open your mouth and say it out loud, like there's somebody in the room to hear what you're saying, you can learn. And let's say you can't do it as quickly. Let's say you're like me and you're not young anymore. Play it again. It's YouTube. It's free. You can do it as much as you want. Play it, and practice. And if you go to HebrewJumpstart@gmail.com, you can email me. I'll send you a packet that includes where you cut it out and write on the back your own flashcards.
Right. Yeah, and that goes through the entire Aleph Beis and, of course, the Nekudot, right? So it's
every letter, every consonant with every vowel in 1 hour.
Brilliant resource, people.
If you open your mouth and speak with it, okay, and don't rely on everybody else with you or the tech or the show itself to say it for you, you can learn it. It's very phonetic. It's not like English where, tough and cough, TOUCH, cough, COUGH. One is tough, the other is cough, not cuff and tough, not cough and tough.
TOOO, TWO.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. But all right, everybody. Rabbi Stuart Federer, author of Judaism, Christianity, A Contrast. Like I said at the beginning, in the description, pick yourself up a copy. But I hope this helped everyone. Any final remarks?
Nope, just thank you for the opportunity.
Likewise, man. I always appreciate it.
So do
But
I.
everybody, I'm Steve Eisenhower. This was the Exodus Project. We'll see you next time.